All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zil. It's great to have you all back here today on this very auspicious day. It is officially spooky month, which is one of the best months of the year, second only to September, of course, because that's just the best one. I am really excited for all of the special things that the spooky month is going to bring us, and we always know that the TF content is always top-notch at this time of year, so I appreciate that. I am joined by my illustrious co-host, K-Libra. How you doing, K-Libra?
I'm doing all right. I had a really good birthday. I'm glad that you finally got to experience Frog Detective.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Frog Detective. What a fucking banger. I now know what happened to Lobster Cop. I was on the edge of my seat throughout all three games. Very riveting. We did a proper table read, actually, and I assigned everyone different voices. And I have to admit that one of the biggest challenges was remembering which voices I gave to which people over the course of the three games.
Yep. You didn't expect some of that stuff.
No, I didn't. I was like, wait, this character's coming back from the first game? Shit, I don't remember what voice I gave.
And that's what happens.
Yeah, it was really good, though. Highly recommend. Everyone should go and buy Frog Detective, all three games. They're wonderful.
Yep, or wait for the new release, because they're going to put them all together.
Yes, that is true.
This is not a paid sponsorship,
No,
by the way.
It's not. We love Frog Detective, and you should love Frog Detective, too. But yeah, before, of course, we get started, as always, if you like the work that we do, you can support us over at Patreon at patreon.com/TFTuesdayPod.
See, that we get paid by.
That we get paid by. I will say, though, I'm not getting paid to say this. Patreon, what the fuck did you do with your rebrand? Your logo looks like an undercooked chicken nugget now. Very disappointed in their rebrand. Also, they still haven't given us a dark theme. Get your shit together, Patreon.
Please.
Like, seriously. Also, the timeline isn't chronological now because yeah, it's not chronological anymore now. Because Patreon needs to be like Twitter, clearly. So, you know. So if you'd like to support us as the internet continues to TF into a worse space, we very much appreciate it. And you can hide from the terrors of Twitter, or shitter as I like to call it now, in our wonderful Discord, where everything is nice and wonderful and nothing bad ever happens. So yeah, that's all I have to say on that. Putting that aside now, I'm really excited to have a very special guest with us today, and really excited to chat with him about his journey into transformation, as well as talk about some of the different focuses he's had in his artistic styling. So, Xids, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, yes, I'm Xids. I am a unrecovering TF-aholic, and yeah, I like to draw a lot of people changing into things. And I've done it for a while.
That's awesome. You say you're recovering TF-aholic, eh?
Unrecovering, yeah.
Unrecovering.
From that. Yeah.
So you're just making it worse.
Yeah, all the time.
I support this. I fully support this, for the record.
So you're does it manifest in any other way, by the way? Yeah, because you draw, but do you have anything in your house, little fun things that little nods, little references, characters? I know that my house has things like that.
The most I have is like a fursuit tail, but that's all I have. But
that's fine.
I've loved TF as far as I can remember. So like almost any movie that I have on my top 10 is probably going to have some TF related things into it. So
okay,
hell yeah,
that counts too. Because it's like media, it's things, it's, it's whatever. Like the former Humans Welcome sign.
Yes, yeah, I have one of those. I still actually, it's funny, I keep saying I need to actually like hang it up in the right spot because I have it sitting in my closet, but I love that thing. Like it's great. And I mean, I literally have like TF art around my house, so,
Yeah.
It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, especially when you have like physical media, like I want to walk around my house and be like, yes, that was when I turned into a Lucario. What an incredible time, and it just get a daily reminder. It's great.
I was trapped in that Pokemon for 3 days.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to forget that anytime soon. It's okay. I'm free range now, so we're all good.
Were you molded into a Lucario?
Maybe. Potentially with someone's feet paws.
A girl, maybe? Even?
Maybe.
Damn. Did anybody ask you first?
Well, that's a good question. But, moving aside from that, Xids, I know that you've been in the fandom since 2003, and so you've really had a chance to see a lot of how it's kind of grown and developed over the years. So I was curious to hear a little bit more about how you found your way there at the time and what's motivated you to kind of stick around over the years too.
Well, back in the olden days, when I was young, I think my first memory, and I'm dating myself a lot, is watching a cartoon called Turbo Teen.
Oh, yeah.
Turbo Teen.
Yeah. It was like literally my first memory that I can recall. And just going through like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all the other cartoons that showed that, movies that showed that, I was always on the side of, when they reverted back or, they almost got there, I was like, oh no, keep going. But I was like that as a kid. So every episode that had transformation in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or anything like that, I would watch on repeat on my VHS, which, kind of dates me again. And then going into the internet, seeing werewolf transformations, and then going to things like web rings and other websites, and just seeing that there's other people who like the same things and drew different things that were not just from like the shows I used to watch. And that really like captured me. And old artists like Pickle Juice and Canada and all those guys, and seeing like, oh wow, there's people who draw this stuff. So I'm probably still weird, but not as weird as I thought I was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of something that I started drawing in 2003 when I was pretty much like, I hadn't drawn before that, and TF was pretty much one of the first things I drew besides Dragon Ball Z characters. More on that later. But I would just draw ideas that I had in my head and just bouncing them off of other, people, and just having like a fandom that was there that I didn't know existed literally, kept me going and trying to get better at drawing. So, yeah, it was a Wild West back there. You could probably look for days and not see a TF for a while. So,
yeah, I remember that the content stream at the time certainly wasn't what it is now. I mean, you open up whatever social media platform it is, and I mean, you will see like new stuff every single day from just a variety of people. And it was not like that. I remember the days where you would go to like Transfer, for example, and you would like refresh it after you'd been like out all day and there was nothing, and you're just like, all right, well, that's fine. That's a normal day, and we would go on. Like I don't even think we thought of things at that time as like, oh, there's not a lot, because in our minds it was like, wow, this exists in the first place, and I'm just thankful that there's some here. It was like I don't think we could have even fathomed like the pipeline as it were now, as it exists today, back in the day. Like it just was, I never would have thought of it like that.
Oh, no. You were just thankful if there was TF, because you just didn't have that in any other media. So
yeah,
I don't even know if any of you guys remember, I think it's like VL art, which really wasn't for TF. It was just a bunch of furry art. And I would even look there just to see if I could find someone maybe doing a TF art on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it was when I realized that FA had a lot of transformation artists on it, but it made the most sense when it finally clicked. Because otherwise I wouldn't have ended up there at all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I just remember, like, specifically, there would be, like, specific sites I would go to every day, and, if there wasn't anything on any of those, then that was kind of it. I mean, you could go searching a little bit harder, maybe on, like, those days where you had a bit more time. Like, maybe I'm going to comb through individual artists on VCL today or something like that, but I remember for a long time it was like, if I don't see it on DA, if I don't see it on Transfer, if I don't see it on For Affinity, and if I don't see it on, like, specific artist websites that I check, then it's like, all right, I guess that's it. Nothing today. Check back tomorrow. So,
Well, funny thing, I didn't even know FA existed until a year after its creation, because I was on DeviantArt for a little bit, because that was another spot that you could possibly find TF art on.
Yeah.
And then someone came in and said, hey, there's a place called Fur Affinity. I was like, what is that? And literally it started a page later on that year. And yeah, I didn't even know FA existed for the first year it was out.
Yeah. I feel like when it debuted, there was this space that it immediately occupied within like the furry collective psyche that was kind of like incredible. And to be frank, I think that's kind of how they've managed to just continue as they are right now, because nothing's ever been able to kind of dislodge them from that like headspace. Yeah. Like I mean, we all know this. There's so many different things that FA hasn't implemented it, and its UI is stuck in 2007. But, you know, part of the reason why they can do that is because like they were such a groundbreaking thing when they showed up to the scene that everyone was kind of like, okay, here's the thing we've been waiting for, you know? And,
right.
you know, even today, sometimes it's hard to imagine not having it in any way. Like it's just so big and takes up such a large part of all of our like media and art, you know, habits, I guess, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, you know, you've seen it kind of develop over time, not just obviously these websites, but like the community as a whole. And obviously your love for TF has stayed constant throughout as well. Have you found that love and like the kind of like seeing these spaces has helped to continue to motivate you to create art? Or have you found it has been like a struggle at any point to like continue the output?
I will say, like we were talking about, unlike any other time, there's been so many TF artists, so many avenues of TF. Like, it always makes me try to do more, gives me more ideas. Mm-hmm. I will say, man, there are a ton of skilled TF artists, and man, you get a little envious. You get a little envious of like, man, these guys are doing like some really good art, and it's in a style and a media and a topic that I love. It does like a double-edged sword. It's pretty much like it keeps me going because I want to say like, hey, that's a great idea. I want to do something like that. And then you just sometimes you're just like, wow, this guy's great or this person's great. You know, it's just one of those back and forth artists have.
Yeah.
But it inspires me every time. New ways you can input TF into certain things. Like I'm getting weird now, and now I'm liking stuff like merge TF. So stuff like that.
That's weird. Well, I don't know why that's so weird.
I mean,
the one thing to pick out and it's merging.
Well, I mean, you know, we saw Color Out of Space, you and I was like, yeah, okay, merged, yeah. But no, I mean, like, you know, to that point, one of the things I will say is that, you know, to piggyback on that, I definitely have found that as I spent more and more time in the fandom, I also began to like broaden my horizons and what I was interested in. And I mean,
yeah.
You know, I'm into upside down TF now, and that's not something that, you know, 6 or 7 years ago I would have been like, oh yeah, that's something that I like. I would have like completely shied away from it. So right. I get what you're saying in terms of like something that maybe you used to perceive as potentially weird or weirder has now become something that is of interest to you.
Right. I poke a little bit of fun only because I've also gotten into stuff that would be considered weirder. I just think that there's more wild stuff. Of course, that's a matter of perception, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there is always something, you know, whatever you're thinking is like the weirdest TF in your head, like anyone listening right now, there is something weirder. Guarantee you, you just don't even know it.
Or your weird is their normal. Shit like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. We're vanilla, man. I guess, now.
Yeah.
I don't know about vanilla. I think I'm weird for other reasons.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things that I kind of wanted to touch on, and you kind of alluded to this in terms of like, you know, seeing other people do different like styles of art and things like that. You know, I've seen your stuff over the years, and I think that your art style is pretty distinct, and it seems to draw heavily on both Western and Eastern kind of like styles and approaches to art. So I was curious to hear a little bit more as to what your original sources of inspiration were when it came on settling on the art style that you have now.
It hinges on like a weird enough Dragon Ball Z and their simplistic style. I say simplistic. It's not that simplistic as, but like that was one of the first things I like practiced drawing for humans, where was like Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily for the human aspect, but for the turtle aspect, I drew Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which you wouldn't think is too difficult, but getting proportions right and all that stuff kind of played a part in that. But those were some things that I latched on to help me draw. I also love looking at other people's artwork and picking and seeing like, hey, I like how they drew those ears, or I like how they drew those muscles. Let me practice on something like that. And just kind of hodgepodge my style just to get a little bit better, or make it look more pleasing for me anyway. And that's pretty much how I started even trying to draw. It was just looking at things and seeing how I could copy. And I have done stuff like when I was young, I've copied pictures like out of books and stuff when I was doing it, but it was never like my own stuff until I started doing transformation. And like I just took all that information I got from that and kind of weaved it into my own style.
Right. No, that's really cool though. Like it sounds like in particular you kind of had done a lot of like the groundwork to build yourself up from like the technical perspective, and it was only when you kind of started on TF that you got to inject a lot of the creative element too.
Oh yeah. It was more of like we were saying, like there wasn't a lot out there, so if you don't have a lot and you have an idea in your head, I mean, might as well try it on your, might as well try it yourself.
Yeah. So. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's easy to get into a bunch of different things with transformation art because you're forced to get out of your comfort zones a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah.
And even if it's something that you want to do, suddenly you find yourself exploring either a new way to express it, or you're trying to understand something that you thought you knew well, but then you notice a detail. It's something that can really push you. Even if you are a capable artist, I think that one of the bigger struggles with making this stuff will be conceptualizing how you want to express changes. Mm. So there are plenty of people who really like it, and maybe they even know what they like, and they're not quite sure what to do to really get it the way they want it, how it's appealing, how it's most satisfying. It can take a lot of work and time to do that. And I think that's pretty unique to try and make this kind of stuff, because you do it in a bunch of ways, and you keep finding new ways to do it.
Oh, yeah, I'm still trying. I'm still finding new ways. So, yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yeah, what new ways have you found recently?
Man, somebody, I guess, did, I won't say, I guess tutorials on, like, tail rippage and stuff like that. And using that as a way to express more action in poses and stuff. Even something as memey as I forgot what the pose was called. I don't know if it's a JoJo pose or something like that, where they're kind of like bent over. I don't know what that was, but it did kind of help you kind of like, okay, how does anatomy work like that, and how can I get that into a TF or something like that? So, yeah, just seeing different like things out there, has helped me kind of evolve kind of what I want to do in transformation, how I want to draw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think I know which image you're talking about, and there was a lot of really interesting examples of tails sprouting out, and it was kind of cool to see it all like categorized and put in onto like one image. And I guess I hadn't even thought of it, but it's a great point you make in terms of like that's then something that you can also like take from and use as a potential idea when you're like drawing a new TFP. So that's great.
The one thing that I think people need to realize is that the idea of a transformation tutorial is very unusual. I've never really seen that stuff until recently.
Yeah.
So there's nobody out there really taking the time to give tips and say, oh, to make something look like this, include these details, be mindful of so and so forth in order to get this type of thing or get this type of thing. Mm-hmm. That's new.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about it, but you're absolutely right. And besides my own like hands issues with dysgraphia, one of the things that drew me into photo manipulating was because there were tutorials for that. Like there were actually a number of tutorials as to how to make a TF image through like photo manipulation software. So now that you mentioned it, I'm like, yeah, there really weren't any drawing tutorials of any kind back in the day, and it really has only been recently that I've seen people even try to like attempt them.
Yeah, and that's because artists that are there are artists who have gained confidence and built up the know-how, so now they can start to express, hey, this is the kind of stuff I like to make, and people ask me how I do it, or they want to see more of it. Here's how you make it, according to my process, so on like that.
Yeah. So then, obviously I know you've taken some inspiration from like the TF space. Do you have any like specific TF artists that really inspired you, both like when you were starting out and even like to now?
Oh man, the boring answer is everyone. But there were things like when I was first starting out, Keenan Woods, even Canada style, some of his stuff, because he had a lot of Dragon Ball Z influence on his artwork. There are so many artists that I look at like in the past and I go like, yeah, these guys were like the pioneers of this stuff. And I would say I would pick and choose certain things that I liked. I liked how someone drew an ear, and I would take that. So it was like I said, the boring answer is everyone. I like it. More came down to how they drew it. If they drew it in a way that I thought was really appealing, I tried to transpose that into an idea I had. And those were just some of the things that, like, especially back in the day, that I really gravitated towards. I know a lot of people say Disney and all that stuff. I never thought I was good enough to draw in the style of Disney, so I never tried that. But just piecemealing what I liked and what I could try to emulate from everyone.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think that's cool that you don't necessarily have specific people to name, but what you did do was like cultivate a very healthy kind of, I guess, diet, so to speak, of looking at a variety of different people and then kind of picking and choosing from the ways in which they do things. I think that's a pretty mature and good way of going about looking for inspiration, because everyone brings something unique to the table. So if there's specific things you can take from different people, then that makes your output that much more diverse.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It was just, it's collective. I like to call it collectively adding some styles onto mine. So I that was pretty much how I at least started trying to draw.
Yeah.
Did you have a narrow focus to start with? If so, what was it?
As far as like what I like to draw or style?
Well, both. Like, what was the style? Did anything change? Did you just refine what you have now that we can see?
Yeah, I pretty much refined. Again, I started with like a bigger eyes, Dragon Ball Z style. It was a lot easier for me to draw. Man, I know when I first started, I drew eyes first. So it was just eyes on a piece of paper, and then I would draw around that, which doesn't seem like that would be very easy to draw like that. Especially now that I sketch out everything first and then I add details later. So just looking back at that, like I would start in weird places because I thought like the eyes were the easiest thing, or the eyes were the easiest thing to start with, and go from there. I drew more comics back then because I felt like there weren't enough TF out there. So I just had stories in my head and I just had to get them out. So those were some things that I did starting out. It's just, starting with some really weird focuses as far as like eyes first.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily weird. I think you were just kind of like, this is the part of like, there's like a problem that you're dividing into parts and saying, okay, I'll start on this part and then I'll work on that part and then I'll work on the next one. I mean, it seems pretty like methodical in approach.
All right. So I don't know how many other people doing art you had around you, art friends or something like that. I found out somewhat early on that drawing the eyes first was usually a problem because it would throw off proportions for everything else. And that would be like a kind of a beginner's trap. Now, there's plenty of people that can get away with drawing in all kinds of orders, but it's something that I remember hearing about early on. So it's actually not that strange that you would start with drawing the eyes first, because I did the same thing. And I don't fully understand the reason for that, but I guess it's just a habit that gets formed somehow. I don't really know why. I could like pontificate about that for a long time, trying to figure it out why, but I don't really know. It's just not that weird. And then, you get told to kind of step away from that so that you can learn to build something a little more consistently.
Yeah, if I knew now if I knew what I knew now, definitely starting with the eyes does cause a lot of problems. And learning little tips and tricks along the way. I didn't have a lot of, like I said, when I was starting out, it was not a lot of people doing TF, so it's not a lot of people I confided in. But I'm guessing that starting to learn like little tricks, like drawing the head first, or drawing the circle for the head, getting proportions right for that, drawing guidelines for the eyes. Knowing that stuff now has definitely given me a little bit of an improvement in my art in the art department. But yeah, starting out like you were saying, it must be just a thing everyone gravitates to first.
Yeah, and there's plenty that we don't know, or like a perspective that we don't get. It's just how it is.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting though that you kind of mentioned that, because I think that in terms of how your kind of style has settled, the eyes are often a very pretty, like it's a pretty important part of the piece in terms of how you kind of emote with them in art pieces. And that was actually something that came to mind when I was thinking about the things I think about when maybe I think about your art. And so I was curious if you have any thoughts on what you feel differentiates your work from your TF peers, like what makes your stuff uniquely yours?
Oh, man. Well, the only thing I can think of is I've been told I have a distinct style. I still don't know what that style is. I'm hoping it's okay, but I like to. There are habits that I like to, that I have formed in my art that I do all the time. Eyes emoting is a big part of what I like to do, especially when I color a lot of stuff. As far as what I do uniquely, that's a very good question. Looking from the inside out is probably really hard for me to figure that out, because I feel like I piecemeal a lot of things from other people that I like. So that my perspective is almost like, man, well, no, I use this person's art to do this. I like to draw ears like this because I've seen this before done well. And I'm not sure if everybody else does that. Probably they do. But yeah. The only thing I can think of is just like I do have a distinct style that probably is noticeable. I'm not sure what that is though, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with that. And I mean, one thing I would say is that in terms of trying to like identify what makes it unique, I think that there's a very unique approach towards like kind of taking in those like Eastern like Dragon Ball Z type influences and then kind of like overlaying that over like Western cartoonish type like themes and such. That would be like my approximation of it, but I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Here's what I have to say about that. The idea of like an Eastern look. Akira Toriyama is the artist who created Dragon Ball. So the style you see there is Toriyama's style. Toriyama's style is very distinct from other anime, anything like Eastern, Japanese, whatever the fuck. Yeah, nothing looks like his stuff. That's why if you look up Dragon Quest, for instance, Dragon Quest makes you wonder, is this a Dragon Ball game? It's not, but nothing else looks like that. And I think that if you're going to adapt anything from Toriyama's work, you are going to come up with something distinct. And especially since you're talking about the eyes, in Dragon Ball, not Dragon Ball Z, it kind of like evolved in Z, but the eyes were like these very distinct like arches, for a lot of the characters, and that kind of changed over time. So if I'm looking at your work right now and you mention the focus on the eyes, I can see a little bit of what you might have been going for. I would say you were going for earlier Toriyama stuff with the eyes, and you kind of held on to that instead of the brow just kind of like making the top of the eyes, which a lot of people draw Dragon Ball characters like that now.
Right, yeah, I wanted the eyebrow to be a little bit more distinct from the eye, more than Dragon Ball Z usually does, especially like with the Vegeta characters and stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that I thought was worth mentioning, especially to Zil, because I'll show you. I don't even think I need to show you. If you just look at a Dragon Ball character and you compare it to anything else, you'll really start to see that it stands apart from everything.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it is anime, but it's its own thing.
Oh, yeah, no, like, let me be clear. I know what, like, Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball stuff looks like, and it is very distinct from any other kind of anime that I've seen, at the very least. So I get what you mean by that.
Yeah, it's weird because you generally know anime when you see it, but a number of them you can tell apart, depending on like the vision of the artist, of course.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I guess I didn't want Toriyama's style to be interpreted as this is like Eastern cartoons, because it's not. It's really specifically his. Like, I'll give you one other thing, because you mentioned the muscles. Xids mentioned the muscles about how to draw them. Dragon Ball has weird takes on muscles. One thing that they get really weird, and I would say wrong, is quadriceps. Quadriceps are really weird in Dragon Ball. And I don't know why they draw them like that. Quadriceps are drawn as like two like lumps parallel each other at the top of the thigh, and you are like, they bulk up and they have like muscle growth and stuff like that. But if they had muscle growth, you would see like the extra swell that would come up, like that's telltale in the quadricep, that kind of like spreads those two muscles apart. And I don't know why that's never there, but it isn't. But that's just Toriyama's style.
Yeah.
I guess nobody, questioned him on it, and he's like, yeah, that's how it is,
Also, it's easier if you don't have to pay attention to certain things.
Right.
I think they still do the leg muscles okay in some scenes, which makes it really weird. But yeah, when they're bulking up and they're like pushing through their skin tight clothing and shit like that, and their quads look like that, I can't get over it. It's wrong, and if you copy all their muscle stuff, you start to realize that they take liberties with how anatomy works. It's fine at a glance, but you got to be careful with Toriyama's work.
Well, then, one of the other things I want to touch on, in terms of the things that I've definitely noticed about your stuff, and this kind of ties in, but like you have a number of like scenarios and tropes that you like to kind of focus on and come back to. So a few that kind of came to my mind when I was looking through your stuff again. There's a lot of like surprising reactions and surprising scenarios. There's a number of different like food and drink triggers. There's often a focus on bellies. And so I was curious to better understand what drew you towards those tropes and then like showcasing them within transformation art.
Oh man. Without saying that I'm a sadist. So maybe a little bit. I would say a little bit. I just got drawn to a lot of the surprise aspects of what transformation does. I like to think of it as, if this happened in real life, I'm sure not very many people, except our, us weird TF people, would enjoy it. So seeing that is like an everyday, like what an everyday Joe Blow guy would go through if he turned into automatically a bear, he would probably be really shocked, really surprised. And it's just one of those things, and I don't have a preference. I love Happy TF just like I love Unhappy TF, and I know that's a big big debate, which one's better, Happy or Unhappy TF. But I just like to draw those experiences. What would it be if that happened to somebody who was just an average Joe Blow guy or girl? Just how would they feel? And chances are, 9 times out of 10, they probably wouldn't enjoy it, or they probably would be shocked, and then it would turn into enjoyment, something like that. So I really like those situations, and I know a few friends are going to hate this, but I also even like sometimes self-def if it comes into like they're turning into more of an animalistic personality of themselves.
Right.
Like, oh no, I'm not just a human that's a bear. It's like, oh no, I'm starting to get bear instincts and tendencies and stuff like that. So those are even getting into my wheelhouse that I kind of enjoy.
I'm curious, when it comes to that kind of like identity death stuff, was there something that kind of like sparked that interest in those like tropes, or was it just something that was kind of inherent when you first saw it? You were like, oh yeah, that's something I'm interested in. It
literally came down to one day I saw TF that had someone kind of, actually, there is a scene in Brave where the queen turns kind of into a bear. She pretty much was just a bear with a crown on, or I think she took the crown off, but she just kind of turned into a bear. And when she went to go talk to her mother, she practically was just a bear, like, and that kind of was like, oh man, that's pretty cool. And it makes you think about like, man, what happened to her? Did she just disappear, or was she kind of like, I know it was just a weird thing, and it was one of those things where it was pretty cool. I don't suggest that with all TF because I do like sometimes just the struggle between human self and animal body, but like it's pretty cool. It's like a little dash of spice on TF every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that the different body directly influences people? Like there is a specific thing programmed in like the very flesh of the creature itself or something? Because that's kind of the vibe that I get when I hear this sort of thing discussed.
Like there's probably like an instinct that comes with that body, or there's a set type of like brain that comes with that body. It's probably the best I can think of when I think of like why I like or why I kind of think of it that way. It's like, okay, when you're transforming, is your brain transforming also kind of into like a bearish or cat or whatever it is type brain?
Yeah. No, I get what you mean in the sense of like, we've kind of talked about this in other episodes too. Like, there are certain things like, we as humans have instincts of our own. And so it's almost like, is there like a specific category that might get lumped in based on the species you're becoming? And like, how does that interact with the human mind? Or, if the human mind goes away completely, how does that then drive the former person forwards?
Right.
You would have to wonder whether or not the creature you're turning into has the capacity to maintain a personality of a person, which we don't really know for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you can argue scientifically about certain parts of the brain being bigger or smaller influence in that, but like the person going away entirely, I don't really know.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't veer so heavy into the body having such a heavy influence. It makes more sense to me that a person builds instincts, because even in reality, people don't understand the signals that their body gives them for a variety of reasons. And, they won't understand that, this means you need this or that, or that you should stop doing something. So if you're going into a new body, you're not going to understand the signals. That may take time, trial and error, depending on how long you're in it. Otherwise, you'll be kind of, you'll be very clumsy, unless one would care to believe that there's like nature versus nurture sort of thing and think that, oh yes, it's like an OS and it'll just, dig its roots into your very personality and force you into being altered, which I also don't know if that would be the case, because there are a number of wild animals that end up learning to live with people or in heavily populated areas. And it makes me think that there isn't like a cut and dry way of thinking that if you were turned into an animal or any kind of creature, you would most definitely be changed in like such a fundamental way that you would no longer be recognizable just like that.
Right. It's just good to think every now and then.
It is. And that's one of the things that's really fun about it. I don't get to really talk about this sort of thing under a lot of other circumstances. And it also makes me think of, what the fuck am I, and how am I working, and how similar am I to anything else on the planet, which apparently lots of stuff is kind of similar to us, which is why we have, the anatomical analogs that we do.
Yeah. No, that's a great point too, because it gets down to this really thorny question of like, what is a personality? And I feel like,
right.
That's not really something that gets discussed a lot outside of like philosophical spaces, but in here we have to grapple with it because, when you're playing with topics like identity death, it's like, okay, well, what actually is like a personality? Like, we might understand to some degree like what the biological basis is in terms of like, the way that your neurons interact with each other, but like what part of that is the personality and what part of that is just, a brain working how a brain does. And we kind of have to like put a lot of thought into that when it comes to transformation, particularly, if there are going to be like some sort of instincts or, you're doing a full like identity shift or anything. Like, I think there's something really interesting to be said around how we kind of conceptualize what a personality is and isn't within the context of transformation, especially because I think it shows to some degree each person's individual biases towards their own definition. I don't think anyone has the same definition as each other when it comes to what makes up a personality, and that kind of difference and nuance is interesting to explore within the context of our art.
Because you have to go to sleep at night.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to think about all of this and then be like, all right, time to go to bed.
Conveniently ignore it. And then when somebody asks you, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't think about those things. We just transform into animals.
Yeah. Oh, man. So then I guess last question on kind of this topic. I'm curious if there's any like tropes that you dislike seeing in terms of like TF art and writing, and if there's any that you like immediately disengage from.
Poof TF.
Okay.
I don't know if that's actually in TF writing or TF art. I think it would be kind of lazy in writing if they did that. Poof TF is probably the only trope that I don't like. And it's in TV or movie media a lot more than this anywhere else. I feel like the show for me is the process versus the outcome. The outcome is fine. Right. The outcome is good. It's necessary. But just A to B, it just kind of doesn't do anything. It's not something that is, for me, as pleasing to see as a process of transformation. However slight or long or the duration or whatever, I think the processing of it, even if they have to just kind of go through Poof TF, but in segments and kind of stretch it out, I feel like that would even still be better than just to see it. Oh, I'm a dog. Poof. I was like, all right. Well, I didn't care about that too much.
Yeah.
I want to get into that just a little bit. Is it what you like more to see more process, or what you actually think is better or worse?
I actually like the process is pretty big for me. Like the gradual change is pretty big. Like the change is good. It's kind of like the bread on a sandwich, but like the process is like the meat and cheese and, you know, condiments that go on it. Just having bread is, I mean, all right, that happened. It's good. But having a sandwich, you know, piled high with, you know, roast beef, oh man, I must be hungry. I'm saying all this. But yeah, it's just the process is just the thing that I'm looking for. The thing that makes it different than anything else.
Me too. And I really love me some process. I really, really do. But I don't bemoan instant transformations either. But some people do. It's like some people are really very like averse to that. And I'm not saying you are. You just showed, you know, the way you said it was that it's lazy or lacking. When, you know, as it was discussed with Angela, I believe, that there is a point to showing that process, the journey of the changes and everything. Why are you showing that? And sometimes there isn't really a need to show that, but that's also why I asked you if it's either a preference or if it's prescriptive. Because if it's your preference and you're like, nah, I don't like it. It's fucking boring. Yeah. It's fucking lazy. You know, it's a visual medium. Show me something. I get
right, it's
that.
a preference. Yeah. It's a total preference. It's. I mean, I won't besmirch anybody for liking Poof. It's just not something that I enjoy. It's more of the thing that I'm after is that part in the middle. But I do understand the two ends are what actually happens. It's just one of those things where it's just, my preference is, and you can have you can have a Poof TF. Everyone does it. It's something that's in media everywhere. So it's not a thing that I wouldn't say you can do.
Okay, so let me ask you then one other thing on this topic, because it went over my head until somebody mentioned it. You know the ring gimmick, right?
The ring gimmick.
Oh, like hoop
TFs.
Oh,
yes, hoop TFs. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, those have no process. Technically
now, yeah.
But yeah, they have no process. Do you count them, or do you like that yourself? Do you find any appeal in it?
So, that's a very good question. I will say that they are very much not a process, though I will say I kind of enforce a process by the slideshow of them sliding through it, like a hoop TF where they're going down. It's not a really good process. It's not a very process is what I normally look for, but I can, it's one of those things where I can still kind of enjoy it, not as much as the process ones, process heavy ones, but I can still kind of force myself to believe that, as stupid as it is, the process of the hoop or the person going through it is a process. So
no. It's not very strange. Sorry, go Zil.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that lends itself to Hoop TF in a way that Poof TF doesn't is, even if it's not showing a process, you still see an in-between stage, if that makes sense. Like, if you've only gotten it over you're below your waist, well, then it's you kind of look like a satyr in that moment, but there is something visually different between that versus whatever you might end up becoming and what you started as. So even though there's not a process, at least visually, you can almost trick your brain into it being a process to some degree, because you see some parts are changed and others are not. And I think that that's kind of why a lot of people who may profess to not like Poof TF can get behind Hoop TF. And, conversely, there's definitely people who are like, no, I'm not a fan of either. And I totally get that too. But I think that because Hoop TF has the advantage of showing almost a mid stage of a Poof TF, it gets away with a lot more than just a normal Poof TF.
The thing I like about that, despite me really liking process, is that it's a really psychologically, it plays with you to see that, especially with how I've seen When Wolves Cry Out do it, where if you're looking through the hoop, your hand looks normal. Looking over the hoop on the other side, there is something completely different, especially if you do it with size. The thing coming out of the hoop is way bigger than you. Your body part is way bigger than you. All that kind of stuff. And any little thing could happen, and everything just goes fucking tits up. But I mean, I guess I just kind of wanted to get into that only because I see the value in an instant transformation too. It can be lazy, but you can still be creative about going from A to B very quickly without showing body distortions and things like that. Because what's a form of process that I think is really lazy, when they do the really old morphing, old visual morphing of you've seen it. Animorphs tried to do this better, but it was born from the same sort of thing, and they were doing weird little
blob
wavy effects and shit like that. But you know what I'm trying to say? There's I guess the only reason I got into this as much as I did was because when I have heard people talk about why they don't like Poof TF, it's kind of like somebody spit in their mouths. And I'm like, take it fucking easy. I also love process. What's wrong with you? I know you didn't do that, Xids, but other experiences and overhearing people, they're like, oh my God. It's poof. Oh my God. It's terrifying. It's fuck off, man.
No. It's definitely just a means to it. Poof TF is just a lesser form of what I like. It's still pretty cool to see something transform, and it's still pretty good to see the struggle afterward. But yeah, it's just that I like process, and that's I wouldn't prescribe otherwise.
I am right with you. Absolutely right with you. It's what I fixate over.
Yeah, it's bread and butter for me. So, oh man. Well, one of the things I wanted to kind of touch on more broadly about your work that I really appreciate is the wide variety of species that you've kind of depicted over the years. If I were to put your work against almost the transfer list of species, you'd be checking off a lot of boxes. And so I guess I was curious to understand what's driven you to have such a broad focus in depicting transformation.
Oh man, I wish there were some answers that were more insightful and more I just like a lot of different animals, and I think they look cool, and I think people should transform into them. It's one of those things where it's just hey, I've never drawn anybody turn into a rhino before. That sounds cool. Let's do that.
Yeah.
It's just a fascination with the process and seeing how different anatomy works. And a lot of stuff I do have is still anthro, but even then, having a second pair of arms, horn, hooves, wings, stuff like that. It's just I wish I had something more insightful, but it's just cool. It's lack of a better word. It's just cool to see.
I'll give you the potato clip too. I just think they're neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just neat.
I was just going to say that, I think that actually is a more standout than maybe you think, because I think there's a lot of people who kind of stick to just a few select species, and I find generally it's actually more like unique and unlikely that someone will go around and be like, oh, I'm going to try this because I think it's neat, or oh, I'm going to try that because I think it's neat. And, in particular, it's also challenging from an artistic perspective to familiarize yourself with 50 different kinds of anatomies, and then try to kind of take that and put it through your own art process to get your own take on it. So, I think the fact that you think it's neat is unique in and of itself. And I wonder, when it comes to finding different species neat, are there specific things that call out to you from each one? Or is there more of a broad, I haven't done this before and therefore that interests me kind of perspective?
Yeah, it would probably be easier for me to tell you animals that I don't like to draw than it would be the ones I do.
So which ones don't you?
Yeah, now I'm curious.
Oh man, now that's what did I get myself into? I don't know. Okay, so
If you have trouble thinking of something, I have a question for Zil, actually.
Okay, sure. We can solve for Xids. What question do you have for me, Libra?
You kind of said that Xids' general appreciation and curiosity is unique. Do you really feel like many people are that incurious?
Oh, putting me on the spot with a spicy question. Okay, so I have found in my experience within transformation that the majority of people, I'm not saying a vast majority, if I have to put a number on it, gun to the head, I'm going to say 55%. 55% of people in general are very focused on one kind of TF that they really like. And I'm putting it into buckets. Maybe you only like canine TF, or maybe you only like, this specific kind of body change. Maybe you just like donkeys or barnyard animals. That kind of I like this specific thing and that's my main thing. I feel like that is very much a majority kind of opinion. Again, not saying it's a huge majority, but it is in my opinion. So when you look at the remaining 45% of people, again, I'm pulling these numbers out of my ass, but bear with me. When you look at the remaining 45% of people, I find that there's kind of three subgroups in that as well. There's the folks who have a broader perspective, but still have limits. For example, maybe you like just about any kind of animal TF, but that's really it. That's where it ends for you. There's people who dabble in a bunch of different kinds and still have a few key things that they'll never be into. And then the last group is I want to become literally almost anything. And I feel like as you kind of go down, there's almost a filter of you have the 55% that have their one specific thing. Then you have the next group that's maybe just animals, for example. Then the next group is smaller and it's I have a variety of different things. And then you get to the bottom where it's you could turn me into a slug and I'll be ecstatic or something. Shout out to all the slug fans. I'm with you there. But, what I guess the thing I'm saying is it does kind of feel like an inverted pyramid to some degree in terms of interest. And there's nothing wrong with having those focuses. But to your question, I think the way it was phrased was a bit, poking the bull a little bit as to, do I think everyone is so curious? But well,
when you say it's unique, that implies that there's something very special and hard to find about it.
Well, as I'm laying out, I think that, that falls more into the category of the last three, or maybe even the bottom two groups that I've kind of outlined. And
hey, that's just why I asked. That's
yeah,
all.
No, I know. But I guess
it's a very specific way to word a question, because I tend to I'm disappointed if people are incurious, which means that I expect people to be interested or have a curiosity similar to mine, because I'm not going to pretend I spend my time looking for everything. But if I have the opportunity for something different, I would like to look into it.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I really asked.
Yeah,
and that's fine. Your answer is perfectly satisfactory as to why you would consider it a little bit of a lesser adopted
a bit of an outlier.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just say, like, this is also why, with almost every single sign-off I have on this show, I tell people to keep an open mind. And I really do mean that, because I think that there's just so many fascinating things about the world around us, be it in species or things or what have you, concepts, ideas, that, we do ourselves a disservice if we're not intellectually curious about these topics. And, sometimes you do have to become a little bit uncomfortable to some degree as you experience something new. Of course, not suggesting you push on any hard boundaries, but sometimes you need to be a little bit uncomfortable and explore things to better evaluate them. And I think that people who do that enrich themselves. And so that's why I call that out with Xids, because one of the things I very much noticed about his work was the array of species and themes that he's depicted over the years. And, that does kind of stand out to me when I think about, the variety of artists. There's definitely lots out there now who do like all different kinds of things, but I still think the majority hews towards like specific types, which again is fine, but I think that's more the majority, and it's more unique to do that kind of wide exploration.
Yeah, I understand that. And yeah, that's a perfectly good answer. I just really wanted to know what you thought. And I still would like to know if Xids was able to figure out which animals you won't draw. Because the way Xids talks about this, I get the impression that you do look in, and then there's like a pushback in you that says, nah, not this. I tried, not this, though.
So the only thing I could come up with is I've never done drawing them clams. I've never done that. And I don't know if I have any inkling to want to do that. Because now I'm even going, I even had to think about like inanimate stuff, and even some inanimate stuff I'd be okay with. I guess the one thing I would say for inanimate, I'm less likely to like the change of material of it. Like, let's say it's just a person who turns into a gold statue. I'm less likely to like that than anything else.
Right.
I mean, that would be the closest I can get to. Besides with the clams thing, which now that I think about it, like maybe I could try that, but like, yeah.
Do you like the idea of a strangeness to the thing that somebody is turning into? Is that an appeal for you? It's an appeal for me. The strangeness of distorting the body from one shape to another is one of the things that I really like to try to interpret and wrap my head around. And it's also something that I really enjoy seeing from other people. Like an artist that I showed off earlier in the Patreon server is one called Beast of Oblivion. I think you can find them on DA, but they are on Blue Sky as well. Okay. And they have a shape-shifting character, and they do shape-shifting in these wonderful ways that just has a huge range. And so I was asking that because, I just wanted to know if that strangeness was something that you enjoy or want to explore, insert into the work, and if that's what factors into why you like certain animals and maybe not others.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is, like, I love that, like you said, the changing of one shape to another, and so much so that I even like TFs that involve species that don't even exist. Like I love going into like alien TF. That is just an alien that I just decided to make. It's just a bunch of hodgepodges of parts that I like tail and ears and stuff like that. So, man, that's why I say it's really hard for me to say that I don't like a species, because I even like species that don't even exist, like in the real world. So the morph of, a human body to another type of body, whether it's a real animal or not, bipedal, or quadruped, like any of those things, even snake stuff. It's one of those things that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
So does the strangeness of it factor into it? The level that something would have to distort to get there or anything like that?
I would say yes, but I even, because even if you're talking about just like a tail that pops, pops out, it's not that big of a change, but I still would enjoy that.
I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm asking for a different sort of answer, because there would be a lot to be said if anybody grew a tail. It was like, oh, a tail's not that big a deal. It would be if you had one.
Oh, absolutely.
It would be.
I would love it.
Me too.
And nobody
That's
should
all
lie.
I want.
And nobody should lie to themselves and say, "Oh, I just have a tail." No,
no,
tail.
That would change everything. Science, where's my tail? I'm still asking for my tail. I'm no longer asking, actually.
the first billionaire who becomes psychotic enough about it will start to make weird shit happen, and that's how it unfortunately will work.
Why aren't our billionaires doing fucking interesting shit with their unethical money, like researching TF, and instead they just do boring, terrible, capitalist, evil things? Like, come on, like where's our hero?
The high score matters.
Where's our hero who doesn't necessarily want to cure all diseases, but just wants to TF people into dinosaurs? I am no longer asking. What the hell?
Also, some of these people unfortunately believe in God, and if you're faithful about Christianity and shit like that, sorry, you'll just have to take my hostility about it. You must understand that some of these motherfuckers think that there is a God, and that they will be so upset if they decide to do something against humanity. Dennis Prager, you fucking Weasley little shit. You would never think of anything fun with your money.
Well, it's also it's also a very narrow view. I don't even think that's necessarily all encompassing of all people from those kinds of backgrounds. But the ones who do end up getting money almost without fail tend to cue from exactly what you're saying.
Why fuel your imagination when you can have anything you want? I don't know. It seems like an empty fucking life when you're born into the money.
Yeah.
Why stop looking for anything? Anyway, without getting into that, I don't think we're gonna get tails unless somebody with enough money and some kind of hack will fucking make it happen. Either that comes first or the revolution.
Yeah, I'll be the first test subject if they ever do come out with one. I'll be the first test subject.
Yeah. I don't know.
I know there's a risk. I'll take one for the team.
They already grafted ears on the back of mice, so sure.
Anything's possible.
Right.
Where's my Lombax series? Come on, science. What the hell? Why can't you give me fictional species ears? What is this?
3D printing ears.
Yeah. Well, I guess speaking of franchises, I guess one of the other things I've noticed, and you kind of alluded to this with your last answer, there's a lot of transformation that I've seen you depict that comes from a wide variety of franchises. So I was curious, do you feel like there's a unique challenge when it comes to depicting TFs from different franchises? And are there any franchises that you continue to go back to because the species there are just so interesting to use for a transformation perspective?
Well, the first answer to that is your style has to shape into at least to the style of the franchise that you're going to a little bit, so that it could be a little bit more recognizable. Not totally. I 100% understand your style's going to still pour through. But like you kind of have to match at least a little bit of what they're going for, which brings, if you're not really good with those type of feet, hands, or tail, or how they create it, it can be a little bit, cumbersome. But it's for me, I just look for a lot of references in that regard.
Right.
The franchise that I really enjoy, Pokemon, is probably one of the few that I like because there are tons of animals that don't exist, and they have different parts and things to them that make them pretty cool. You have a rat that can shoot electricity, like that's pretty awesome. You have a dog that has a skull on its head just from birth. So you have a lot of things that it taps into my like, wow, that's an animal that doesn't exist, and that's pretty cool, and I like how that looks. So Pokemon would be one of the few franchises that I really enjoy TFing people into. And recently, I believe it's Monster Hunter. I believe it was they have some dragons on there that are pretty cool that I like as well.
Monster Hunter has a lot of really fucking cool things. And the reason I don't like Monster Hunter is because you got to kill them. I just don't want to.
Right.
I just don't want to.
It's like, why? Why do we have to do that?
Yeah. No, I definitely, I agree with you there. I don't want to have to kill the monsters. I want to be the monsters. Like, what is this?
Right.
You just befriend the monsters. Nah. And then I see people wanting to turn into all kinds of stuff from there. I'm like, okay, I get it. Just the hunting part, I don't fucking want to. I tried. Anybody who likes the games, fine, sure, whatever. But I tried it. I tried World, the simplest one to get into, and it just was not happening. Even with a non-lethal option, it just wasn't happening. And then it turns out that if you do non-lethal, you also don't get all the things you possibly could. So you would have to kill them. So fuck me, I guess. I just don't want to play Monster Hunter.
Yeah. That is a shame. So I guess the other thing I wanted to touch on, there's also like a lot of like the diversity I was talking about with species also extends to, the different kinds of subjects you depict in your art. Like there's a variety of different body types, genders, racial backgrounds, and more when it comes to your TF subjects, which I think also stands out within the community. There's definitely issues with how diverse the pool is in terms of the average TF that's depicted. And so I was curious, have you found that to be a gratifying experience? And have you ever had any sorts of issues when it came to depicting that sort of diversity within the community?
No, actually, it's been received pretty well. I won't say that I had any inclination that it would, but the thing that I kind of liked about the community is pretty much we're species first, then real life second, which I think does a lot to like meeting people because your interests are the things that pour through first. Then you get to meet the real person and you're like, okay, this doesn't matter because this is almost superficial because I know the person's like, we have similar interests and similar things that we like. So in that realm, like, even drawing stuff like that, it's been received really well just because I feel like people just kind of like the process, whether they can view themselves in that person or not. And even then, I think some people can still see themselves in whatever form, gender, background, anything. I think people usually can still do that because at the end of the day, the process to the animal is still that change that's going to be way different than what they started out at. Mm-hmm. To me, it's been very gratifying experience, especially with the TF community. That I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I'm really glad to hear that. I will say that it's something that I definitely notice a lot when artists do make that effort, and I think that it's really good when they do because like you said, we are a kind of a species first. Oftentimes we're about the process, but I also think that having a wide group of TF subjects is something that's important, especially as the community continues to grow and pulls from a variety of diverse backgrounds. I think that it's really nice and necessary, to be frank, to have that kind of representation. So I very much appreciate it when I see artists doing that. And I know it's something that you have done quite extensively with your stuff. And so I'd be remiss to not mention that. But I do agree as well. I think, people are often very focused on the species itself too. And you can kind of put yourself in most anyone's shoes when it comes to, imagining going through that exact same kind of transformation process. And I mean, hell, if we have the imagination to imagine ourselves turning into animals, I'm pretty sure we should have the imagination to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. So,
right. It's not a far step. It's not a far step.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just what happens. We have a bias toward ourselves and what we know. And it will come out. I agree. It's good when people try, and it is good for people to explore, represent, things like that. You do it if it's in you. Just consider it. Yeah. It's a good thing to consider.
So then looping back kind of both of the broader topics that we've talked about here before, are there any kind of specific things that you look to bring into kind of like the pool of content and the fandom that you think was lacking before, assuming, we haven't touched on it yet? Are there any like other things that kind of stand out to you in terms of, I didn't really see this and I brought this to the community, or this is the thing that I'm still trying to bring the community that I want to see more of and don't see enough of right now?
Wow. Probably back in 2005 or 2006, I probably would have more to offer for you with that. There's just a huge variety of what you could get at TF nowadays. When I see a unique idea, one, it is, I don't want to say it's rare, but it is something that is really great. But there's so many people doing so many different cool things. Like, pretty much the only thing I could think of is just my idea, just an idea, and it's nothing specific. It's just, hey, I had an idea about this story, and everyone does that. Everyone brings a story that never has been told before. It may have parts that are topic that we've heard of before, but it's just their own unique spin on it. So
Right.
the only thing I could do is the only thing I can say, and I think this is for every artist, writer, or anything, is just your own spin on a story or on your own spin on a topic that we all love. You know, I think TF is there's so many people and so many things that are out there that people are adding that it'd be foolish to say that there's something super new, but I think everyone does have a different spin that they like to use or like to share.
Yeah.
So you feel like a lot of bases are being covered already, that you feel like you're just mostly adding to things you like that are out there?
I think that if we're talking about the general stuff, I can't think of anything that is so like radically new, which with TF is just, it's a change. So it's automatically in a topic of its own. But like, I think that everyone has like a different story or a different spin of a story, which I think is like with everything, every media, it's just a different pretty much spin on a story that we may have heard or, or have parts of other stories. So it just, as far as like just bringing my own thoughts, my own ideas on TFs that we've seen, I think that's pretty much what I can say I brought as far as myself and what I've seen out there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess there's something inherent to you making your content. You inevitably bring something new because it's yours?
Yeah, it's my rendition on transforming. Like, there may be 50 people transform into capybaras, but I have a different rendition on that than someone else might.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that makes sense.
That's a fine answer.
That's a great way to kind of think about it. And yeah, I think especially like you were saying, because there's such a volume of different types of content and different takes on different tropes, it feels more and more difficult sometimes to do something that's like brand new or groundbreaking. But what you can do is give your own perspective and take on something that maybe has been done already, and that is in and of itself unique. So I think that's a good headspace to be in, to be completely frank, because I think there's also often a lot of pressure on people to, stand out and be unique and do something like, completely wild. And it's like, at the end of the day, we're all artists just trying to express ourselves. So if you're authentic to that expression, shouldn't that be unique enough? So
Right. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So when it comes to, again, kind of like wrapping up this kind of discussion, when you are like trying to like, give your own takes on different like subjects or species or themes or anything like that, I'm curious if you actively think about like pushing boundaries in any way in terms of like what you're comfortable with or what you've seen depicted, or if you have kind of like an approach that you apply to each kind of your drawings that like occupies this like, I guess, spectrum of what you're like interested in, like willing to do.
Yeah, as I like to say, as my interest grows, as far as different things that I like to encompass, like I was saying earlier, like with Merge TF, it's something I didn't like before, but I really enjoy now. It's just those things that are like, okay, I like this now. I want to try my hand at drawing this.
Right.
Or I'll see someone draw a new Pokemon or an animal that rarely gets drawn.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that are kind of like, oh, and it really is a thing where the TF community as a whole kind of drives the interest of what I want to do to pretty much put my own spin on things. So I love the fact that there's so many TF like enthusiasts, fans, artists, writers, people doing stuff with photo manipulation, animation, all of those things. And they all play a part in like driving my like, oh, I've never seen something like that before. What if this was the setting? Or what if this was the trigger? Or what if this was the animal? And, those combinations are like, I want to say are endless as far as the combinations you can put together with your own type of drive and what you can do with it. So like just the community as a whole pretty much drives my like want to do other things and want to try other things that I've maybe never tried before.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting. You have a pretty collective view of things. A lot of times it's very personal, but I think you really look at the whole a lot when it comes to all this stuff. Am I right?
Yeah. And maybe it's from being in a situation where when I first started, it felt very lonely in that situation where I still love TF in a personal sense, but like the community of what I can grab from and what I can pretty much enjoy is usually from a collective of the TF community as a whole. It's just starting out when you're just like, I know 2 people who even think about TF, then to get to like a more holistic, like there's tons of artists and writers and everything. It's kind of one of those, I don't want to let go of looking at everyone's stuff and feeding off of that. Because it was at first personal because there was nothing to go off of.
So you said if it was personal at first, so then what is it now to you? What would you say?
It's a personal enjoyment that I like to grab in like new things from other people. So it's a personal enjoyment that I progress through looking at the community as a whole. So seeing like, hey, I've never seen someone turn into a musk deer before. You're like, oh, I didn't even know those things existed. That looks really cool. And then I get personal enjoyment from that as far as pulling from the community.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. I think it comes off to me also, you derive a lot of enrichment from seeing what somebody could do next. Yeah. Where somebody like me, I do my very best to try and push myself to add to something, add to it. And I don't know, I guess I don't really wait on people anymore. I would like hope for something, but I think that also is because of my narrower tastes on things, because I'm pretty sure that in some regards I am much broader and in others I am much narrower.
Okay. It could be something as simple as just you're pushing yourself to do something on top of something you've seen. And that's what kind of, like I said, I love seeing the new art that's out there. I love seeing the new ideas out there. And, maybe I could put something that's a little bit different than that. But like, I will admit that like I grab from the community as far as enjoying, what other people bring to the table. And then seeing how I can fit in with maybe my own spin on that. Or even if I find something new that was inspired by that.
Right. Okay. All right, then. I think it's always very interesting to speak with the people who are very community-minded about this, because I find it very difficult to fit in. And that's why it's good to talk to people who don't feel that way, because I like to understand.
Yeah. Absolutely. And speaking of community, we have a few audience questions that I'm very excited to go through and get all of our opinions on. And I guess I'll start with this first question from Postal Roo. And so Postal Roo asks, what is your favorite best worst media with transformation? So basically media with an unintended so bad it's funny quality, or with a deliberately campy quality. Wanted to initially say movies, but this is open to TV shows and video games too. So I guess I'll open the floor. Does anyone have one they would like to share first?
I've seen a bunch of clips, and some of them are like really remarkable. The Dark Wolf transformation. Everybody seen that one? It is a woman turning into a werewolf, and it is really fucking weird because she stumbles into an open space and the camera pans around her, but it's clearly an entire 3D model that has replaced her that is turning into a werewolf. And then when she is done, her makeup doesn't really match what you saw in the transformation.
Oh, that's great.
That kind of thing really lives on in my head. And I mean, I've seen plenty of things and like all those things. Like I haven't seen Dark Wolf, but I've seen the clip, and I can't show that clip here because topless chick. But yeah, that's one that immediately came to mind. I don't know if you want me to dig for more, but anybody else got examples?
No, I'm actually a little stumped. Go ahead, Xids.
The only one I can think of is the one that kind of a lot of people scratched their heads on before. I think it's the werewolf in Paris with the knee out of the thigh type transformation.
Yeah,
it was the knees breaking backwards. I showed that one already.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was kind of weird because it kind of got you out of it. You're like, wait a minute, it didn't need to do that. It just can elongate the one. But it was just one of those things where it was just kind of weird when you first saw it.
Well, if you know, because when I first saw it, I didn't think it was all that weird.
It's something just when I saw it the first time, I was like, what? Wait, why did that bend there? Okay. Well,
my brain was like, why not? I never seen that before. Ooh.
Oh, man.
Give me all those joints.
I am, for some reason, drawing a blank.
So this is like one of those questions. Did we finally hit a question that you're just kind of like, I don't fucking know?
No, actually, hold on. Okay, so I'm going off of something I actually saw recently, but I guess this isn't quite in the category of what Postaru suggested, but there's a lot of really good, campy, very like not serious transformations that I've seen over the years in commercials. There's some really, really terrible ones, but one of the ones that stands out to me as like really bad but also great, there's this Nike commercial where, and I could not tell you, gun to the head, what the ad is actually like supposed to be advertising, but there's this guy who gets like transformed into like this half snail creature, and it's interesting because they're clearly trying to make it good, but like the whole like setup makes no sense. Like someone falls on top of him and becomes the shell, which is like a rolled up like sleeping bag or something, and then he has like the eye stalks come out, and it's very strange. I could not tell you what is supposed to be going on or what they were going for, but I think it's fucking great. I think the detail is actually quite good in it, but like the concept makes no sense, and a lot of it is just like to me it feels deliberately campy. So if I had to pick one, it would be that one. I really like that one.
Okay, yeah, and I wish I could show the Dark Wolf one.
Oh,
I can show you guys after, but
yes.
Damn, man, it's unbelievable.
Oh, man. Well, I look forward to seeing it. Then the next question we have is from Bolus. And Bolus says, uploading your brain isn't everyone's cup of tea, but one of the things it can offer is extremely outlandish and abstract TFs and bodies that can't normally be done in a physical setting, usually due to having to obey the laws of physics. So what is an example of a TF that you would choose that involves such an environment? Like basically, you've gotten your consciousness uploaded to something and you can turn into literally anything. There's no like restrictions on physics or anything like that. I can go first. I had a chance to think about this one. So I would transform into a holodeck from Star Trek, and I'll explain why. There is like a really interesting meta TF you can have going on where like you've TF'd, but then also things inside of you are also TFing and they're also part of you. And I like to think that would be like a really like disorienting yet cool kind of thing, because you could both occupy the space of like seeing yourself TF or seeing other people TF while also experiencing the changes themselves, having that like dual role of observer and actually being in the like the role of the victim, volunteer, whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, obviously that's not something that could ever really happen. I mean, this is a fictional thing as it were anyways too, but if, you're getting your consciousness uploaded, then, the sky is the limit. So as off the wall as that may seem, I would pick holodeck from Star Trek.
Okay. So this is really just going to be like an abstract transhumanist sort of thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Really. I don't really fancy myself turning into a lot of things anyway, so I guess that's why it's harder for me to just jump on the question. Yeah, I can't really settle on anything. I'll try. If it does another, then I'll have a little bit more stall to go on.
I was thinking, like, would being a transformer, would that fall in?
I feel like that would, yeah.
I mean, if you could upload yourself, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be, not necessarily Optimus Prime, but, like, you get to be your own favorite vehicle.
Well, consider this. They had to adopt the form in the first place. They didn't come to Earth as trucks and cars and everything like that.
Right.
It was how they needed to adapt. Theoretically, you could be a Cybertronian, and, I mean, it's kind of implied that once they pick a form, they're just kind of that way, but I think that's kind of bullshit to me, and I don't know if they've ever really explored that.
Also, they can pick like a different car later on if they find something.
I would like to think. Why the fuck not?
Yeah. I think a transformer would be pretty cool. I mean, you get to, the funny thing is you get to keep in the form of transformation the whole time. So you're a robot that also transforms. So
it's great. No, I love Transformers, so I support that.
All I can think of right now is spoilers for Ghost in the Shell, 1995. I think it's 95 anyway.
Yeah.
All I can think of is 2501. Nobody's watched Ghost in the Shell. So, quick and messy brush strokes. You have some mysterious entity known as 2501. People are considered some kind of like super hacker. You find out it is not a super hacker. It is an experiment gone out of control, something that has leaked into the internet and gained self-awareness. And it is just going around places. And it ends up taking in the main character who discovers what it really is. And it speaks to her. And she becomes one with it. And her consciousness goes on to exist in like the nebulous like cyberscape, if you will.
Wow.
So both of them cease to exist and become one thing, but she's never really gone. Because everything that is her still exists, but not as it was before.
Right.
And I bring this up because if I am in such a situation where I could upload my consciousness somewhere, I could be like 2501. 2501 has existed alongside the major Motoko Kusanagi. Yeah, Motoko Kusanagi, however you want to say it. Say it right, don't say it like that. But yeah, the major she goes by, and I would think that if I'm already there to uploading consciousness, that thing has been in like whatever body it wants to be. It can be in like military hardware. Yeah, you could just settle for being an abstract, self-aware intelligence that is absorbing knowledge through every facet of humanity as long as it's going up there, which can be a gift and a curse.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's hard for me to pick, because that's where my mind goes.
Yeah.
What was that about existentialism and philosophy and things like that?
It's our bread and butter here, baby. Oh, I love that. Awesome. And then the last question I have is from Paula Brady. And so she says, if you had the chance to remake or remaster one movie that includes a memorable TF, which one would you choose and what would you change about it? So you can change things like the species, the transformation scene, something in that realm, anything at all. But specifically a movie.
I think that I would just... I have like a few that are coming to mind, and it's really, really hard to pick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I go back to Species and think I would really love to draw that transformation out, because that form is so fucking weird, what Zil turns into. And I would just love to see that, I would love to see that redone, I think. I could pick a bunch of other ones, but I don't want to like linger on the question and start listing. All of these could use a makeover, so that's the one off the top of my head. See what you could do with Sil or Eve. Eve is kind of cool because she's the main. She's one of the main characters in the second movie, and she's like the first monster, except she's socialized and not like a clear and present threat all the time.
Yeah.
all the time.
So I was sitting on this, and I was having some trouble thinking of this one too. But I'm actually going to settle on one that I've joked about in the past on this podcast. So I would want to go and remake Ginger Snaps, but have Ginger Snaps be a guy, but still turning into a female werewolf. And I think that would be really interesting. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff you could talk about within the realms of trans identity. And it would, you would have to change some of the messaging, but I think by the end of it, you would get to kind of a similar sort of conclusion, but with a lot of added layers that I think would be interesting. And also you could make it more horny, but that's, neither here nor there. But yeah, that would be my pick. I think that would make for a really interesting remake that also it would stand out from the original one, I guess. And I think that would be kind of like what I would like to see from a remake of a TF, because, we all have the TFs that we like, and we would all love to see them in better quality. But when I think about a remake or what have you, I guess my mind goes to how can I also make this something that will stand on its own and be unique? So I think that changing that one thing about Ginger Snaps, would lead to a lot of different writing, but would also make it an interesting movie on its own.
Okay. I think that, I could talk to you about that later. Sorry, Xids, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I have a question, though. I guess I can answer this question with a kind of a question. I know one movie that comes to mind that is, I want to say, very famous transformation, The Werewolf in London. Mm-hmm. Do we think that would be? It won. I think it won an award or
Academy Award.
Yeah. Do you think it could be remastered with this technology? Do you think it would be better? Do you think it would lose some of its flair? Because that's the one thing I can think of that I would love to see an extended, really rendered version of that. But do you think that's even possible?
Yes,
I think so. Yeah.
Is absolutely possible to do. The things that you would have to consider are that it would take it would be very labor intensive. You would have to have almost, I imagine, kind of a subsection of the production dedicated to that. Mm-hmm. If you really, really, really want to draw it out. You would have to treat that like a short film, and then go all in on it with what I'm thinking you're wanting to see.
Yeah. But within the bounds of the question, that would be totally possible.
Yeah. And I actually like that answer a lot, because a lot of people say, why can't we just do it like that anymore? But it can be better.
Yeah, it could be better.
Right.
I agree.
I would like to see I would like to think that we could. I just one of those things I know a lot of people hold on to, that's a classic. I'm yeah, it is. It's a very awesome scene. But would it be done better if we had the technology and all the prosthetics and whatever CGI stuff that you would even want to add to it? Would that make it better? And you guys have said it. I think it would probably be too, but it might be blasphemy.
Fuck, man. I wish that was my answer.
It's a good answer.
I think that's actually a great choice.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, yeah, I would love to see that someday. That was all the questions that I had. I don't know if you have any questions for us.
Oh man. The question I'll ask both of you guys is just kind of one that I think everyone asks, what got you into TF? That's pretty all-encompassing, I would guess.
Yeah. I've talked a little bit about this on past episodes, but I have additional things I can add to it. So Animorphs was the big thing for me, but even before that, it was actually Magic School Bus, specifically the CD-ROMs that had animal transformations. They showed in particular mixing between the human side and the animal side with them, which again was whoa. So those would be the ones that I would mention right away. But the other thing I'll mention, actually, I haven't talked about this one before. There's actually a decent amount of transformation in another educational CD-ROM series. I wonder what Zil played a lot of as a child. There was a series called Clue Finders, And there's actually an extensive amount of transformation in Clue Finders in the fourth grade adventures, as it were. Spoilers, I guess. For towards the end of the game, actually, every single character gets TF'd, like of the main cast in some way. Some of them get wings, some of them get like muscles, some of them get like animal enhancements. It's great. I really like that. In the sixth grade adventures, again, spoilers, I guess, I don't know, one of them starts to turn into a plant, actually, a plant person. Really interesting stuff, and that definitely stood out to me and kind of fed my young mind at the time of like, oh wow, this is a thing that keeps coming up and I keep being very fascinated by it. So yeah, all of that kind of led into one big interest, as it were.
Mm-hmm. So educational CD games, and for me it's still that one movie I saw when I was really young. I don't know what it is. I don't think I've ever seen it since. I just saw somebody turning into something. I think it was a werewolf. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I remember a lot of blue in it. It was blue and it was dark. I have no idea what it was. I don't think I'll ever find it. It stuck with me though, because I was on vacation and on the beach. I was thinking about it. And then anytime I saw it again, I'm like, ooh, it's like that movie. Do I get to see more? And yeah, there you go. Yeah. It's not, it's both dissatisfying and frustrating of an answer. Oh, everything else that kind of like really solidified what it is for me came much later in life, but I don't have a clear-cut answer. It's nebulous, like I don't know, believing in God.
it's always like a little seed.
I just know what I saw, and I held on to it.
Oh yeah, I can relate to that for sure.
I didn't know that was the specific axe you were going to bring to grind today, to today's episode.
I just said that I'd be hostile, so I was.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much for that question, Xids. And if people are curious in finding more of their stuff, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on FA furaffinity.net/Xids. I have a Patreon. It's just patreon.com/Xids. And I'm usually on Twitter a lot of times posting stuff. I don't think I'm going to do Inktober, but sometimes I do Inktober and stuff like that on there. Okay. But yeah, just around on those sites. Just awesome. Throwing out some weird TF artwork.
Hell yeah. And we love that. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on again. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I hope that y'all enjoyed this episode as much as we did recording it. As always, if you want to support us, you can also find us on patreon.com/TFTuesdayPod. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the upcoming week. I hope that everyone has a wonderful week, and I hope that you all stay hydrated, keep an open mind, and stay TFy. And we will see you back here again next week.
And remember, you are not alone in this abyssal darkness.
Bye for now.
See you later.